This episode is sponsored by Cara Bendon Brand Consultancy. If you need branding and packaging for your product, Cara is my absolute go-to. She and her team create beautiful and unique branding so your product will impress retailers, stand out on the shelf and look great online. They also offer packaging and e-commerce website designs so you can get everything set up and ready to launch, confident that it looks brilliant. Cara is absolutely fantastic at helping guide you through the process and has been a guest on this podcast twice, in fact. She even designed this podcast artwork for me when I worked with her with my own branding back in 2021, and I can't imagine not having this brand now. If you'd like to chat to Cara about branding for your business, she's offering a free, no obligation call with any of my listeners. You can book your free 30-minute call via the link in the show notes. Thank you again to Cara for sponsoring this episode. Welcome to the Bring Your Product Idea to Life podcast. This is the podcast for you if you're getting started selling products or if you'd like to create your own product to sell. I'm Vicky Weinberg, a product creation coach and Amazon expert. Every week I share friendly, practical advice as well as inspirational stories from small businesses. Let's get started. Hi, today on the podcast I'm talking to Genevieve Sweeney. Genevieve is the founder of her own luxury British knitwear brand. Genevieve is devoted to championing and celebrating slow fashion, British manufacturing and sustainable design. I hadn't actually realised what an artisan craft creating knitwear was, and Genevieve speaks a lot about the process of designing and creating knitwear by hand. She talks about how her knitwear is sustainable, about slow fashion, and about how she keeps the manufacturing of her knitwear in the UK and why that is so important to her. So I would love now to introduce you to Genevieve. So hi Genevieve, thank you so much for being here.
Hi there, thanks for having me.
So can we start with you, please give an introduction to you, your business and what you sell?
Yes, of course. So I'm Genevieve and I'm the founder of a luxury British knitwear brand called Genevieve Sweeney. So I design and manufacture British knitwear for womenswear, menswear, accessories and socks. So I champion and celebrate British manufacturing with heritage craft and innovation in the industry with responsible fibres.
That's amazing. Thank you. And I've got so many follow-up questions. But let's start with talking a bit about being a knitwear designer, your background and how do you become a knitwear designer?
It's quite niche, definitely. So as a lot of people, I knitted as from a young age, from 5, but I always knitted secretly because it wasn't a cool hobby then. So I knitted all my life, and I was never ever not knitting, even in the car, train journeys, I was always knitting. And when I was doing a Saturday job when I was about 16, I met a student who was in her second year of a fashion knitwear course. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is it. This is like my path is set. So I went to university in Nottingham Trent, and it was a 4-year degree in fashion knitwear. So you learn how to knit on the machines, you learn all the design concepts and inspiration, and you also do a year in industry. So I did a year in London. I worked for a swatching company where we designed mini mock-ups of designs that were sold. Sold designs to like H&M, Abercrombie and Fitch, all Scandinavia and US, and it was just an amazing experience of understanding my handwriting and just understanding what other brands were looking for. So after I graduated, I then went on to work for other global brands. So I went to New York and worked for Rag & Bone, and then Hugo Boss in Switzerland, and then came back to London and worked for Burberry and Lance Scott before setting up my brand.
Well, that's amazing. Thank you. Gosh, you've got so much experience.
Yeah, I've packed a lot in, definitely. But yeah, I've always loved knitwear and the the physical process of knitting. So I always knew I wanted to set up my own brand, but I just had no clue how to do it in a commercial business, I guess. So all my jobs really taught me the lessons I needed to learn how to design, production, learn everything, which was great.
And I'm going to ask what's probably a really stupid question, so forgive me, but is knitwear design about designing at how the garment sort of looks and fits, so whether it's a cardigan or whether it has buttons or a zip and that kind of thing, or the design, like the patterns on it, or is it a bit of both?
So it's both. I think what's really beautiful about knitwear is that you're creating the fabric as well as the silhouette. So it could be a jacquard. So you'll be doing the fashioning of the silhouette as well as the pattern, or the cabling of stitches. So it's a bit of both, which is really nice. And sometimes it could be like a much more simple style that you're showing the beauty of the wool. So I guess that's what I love about it. You're doing both things at once.
And actually, as you were answering that, I was thinking it makes sense you would have to do both things at once, really, because I suppose it depends on the wool you're using. And I'm sure there's so many factors that are involved in sort of how a piece of knitwear sort of looks on your body.
Yeah, and I think, well, cheap knitwear will be custom sewn, but obviously there's a lot of waste with that. And if you're using a really expensive yarn, you don't want any waste. And also sustainably, you don't want any waste. So yeah, so creating the shape is where that goes in with the yarn as well.
Thank you. And so what inspired you to start your own brand?
So I, as I said, I've always wanted to, but I never knew what I wanted to say, what I wanted it to be. And when I moved back to London, I had my own studio, and I used to buy old machinery from eBay, from Gumtree, and set them back up again into working order and knit just for passion. But from buying these machines, I was traveling around the UK and mainly in Scotland. And the people I was buying these machines from used to work in the knitwear industry, but lost their jobs when all production went to the Far East in like the 70s, 80s. So I met all these incredibly passionate, talented people who just had this huge love for knitwear and had no outlet, like they had no jobs. And it was like whole communities had completely lost their jobs like overnight. So it was really heartbreaking to see. So I started doing kind of I guess projects with them where I was kind of introducing them to more modern handwriting and trying to kind of get them knitting so they had something to show to give to other brands. And I think the first kind of project I realized that this was the start of my brand, and this is what I wanted to do, was really championing these artisans across the UK and kind of revitalize and revive the industry.
That's amazing. Thank you. And so how does that work now? Are you still working with some of these people that you met all those years ago?
Yeah, definitely. So I'm still working with some of them. Some have retired. So I guess the age range of the people I met was literally like 50 to 80. So,
okay.
It was like 10 years ago. So some of them aren't working anymore, but some of them are. From that, obviously some of them only did the knitting. They didn't do the linking or the washing. So I then had to kind of find this kind of infrastructure around, because some people still could link from home, some people could knit from home. And then I had to find other factories to do the finishing. And so I then had to start building this kind of like infrastructure and kind of get all the kind of clogs together, which was really difficult. And most people kind of like laughed when I told them what I wanted to do. It took a couple of years, but once it was together, it worked really well. But I then also started approaching other small factories, kind of like family-run factories, might just be like one or two people running it, or kind of larger factories as well, to then do the knitwear and like the manufacturing, or kind of help with the processing of like the washing of this kind of artisan pieces.
So what does, if you don't mind me asking, thank you for explaining that, but what does washing and linking mean? I'm really sorry, but I don't know.
No, it's cool. Sorry.
I know nothing about this. It's really, this is so interesting, so I know nothing about it.
So when the jumpers are knitted, they're knitted in panels, and then the linking is the kind of construction of it. So they're putting the seams together, putting the collars on, and then the washing of it can be really, really skilled. So if you're washing something like cashmere, the knowledge is just incredible. That they just know by kind of like hand feel, and if you've washed it like 2 seconds too much, that's it, it's gone, it's ruined. So that's kind of really key. And in Scotland, they just know just the perfect way to wash it, and they don't wash it in a super soft way, because then it pills you get all those kind of like bumps on them, or the bubbles. So they wash it in a kind of a kind of less kind of soft way, that means that you then break it in. So when you wear it, it kind of gently softens on your body, and you don't get any pilling. And it just lasts for like 20 years, like 30 years. Like, it is incredible. And it's just that knowledge. It's just really hard to find. And the linkers as well. It's really a skill that's massively disappeared. There's not many people doing it. And now modern technology is coming in with like whole garment knitted machine. So like the whole garment is knitted in one, like no seams or anything. So then the link is not needed anymore. So that's a real shame. So that's where I'm kind of really wanting to kind of help revitalize, is to keep these skills here and keep that knowledge here.
That's amazing. And so, okay, so if I'm understanding, you have people who work for you who do the knitting, and other people who might do linking, and other people who might do washing. That sounds like logistically quite a challenge.
Yeah, it can be. And at one point it was kind of very challenging, because obviously, like, people are different ages and have, I don't know, family commitments. Sometimes that can be quite hard, which is why I try and take if a kind of chain breaks, I guess, I then have the kind of factory to be able to do it there as well.
That's amazing. And so, I'm just really quite fascinated by sort of how you've put together this model. And I think it's amazing. And I know that you're such a champion of British manufacturing. And I guess this is really, really demonstrates that.
Yeah, no, yeah. It's so in my studio, I've got kind of some of the machines that you would use for the linking. I've got 3 of them here. So I do some of the linking, and one of my goals for this year is to start an apprenticeship to teach linking here as well. So yeah, it's nothing. I think we do a lot of tours here in my studio on the site, but I'm in like a heritage craft site, so there's lots of other creatives here as well, and we do a tour once a month, and it's just amazing to be able to show people how these machines work, what they do, and it kind of helps I don't know, build that understanding of the complexity of manufacturing and the importance of it.
And even though that you're using the machines, it still feels like a very sort of intensive process, as in there is still a person involved. Is that right?
Yeah. So it's a kind of it's like a dial with lots of points for the linking, and someone still has to put every stitch onto each point. So it is still led by hand, which is really beautiful. Really beautiful. I love watching. It's one of those kind of really hypnotic things to watch.
It feels like a real skill.
It is. It really is, and it's also a really well paid job. Like in Scotland, it's a very highly paid, well paid job, especially in Scotland, where it's very sought after.
That's so interesting. And I'm assuming though that despite being well paid and skilled, there aren't that many people, in these roles, as you say, that some of the I'm sure there are factories abroad, as you say, who are knitting whole garments for machines now with very little human intervention. So it's really great all you're doing to kind of encourage people to still do this.
Yeah, and a lot of factories stopped doing the apprenticeships because they would train someone up, and then another factory would come along and kind of poach them. So then that kind of stopped that kind of passing on to another generation, and that's I guess where we've kind of like got a little bit stuck in this industry with the teaching.
So it sounds like there aren't that many new people coming up and learning these skills.
Yeah, but when you do, like, I went to Scotland about 9 months ago, and I was speaking to a young girl who was 18, 19, and learning how to link, and she was so proud of her skill and what she was doing, and it was just like, it's just so wonderful to sit there and like talk to her and just kind of really feel her passion and energy for it.
That's amazing. And talk to us a little bit about your apprenticeship. I think you're the first person I've spoken to who's doing any kind of apprenticeship scheme. So do you have any ideas now on how that will work?
I'm still kind of putting it all together because I need to. I'm trying to get investment for a machine, so be able to do the knitting here as well as the linking. But I'm speaking to Quest at the moment, and yeah, I'm I'm hoping that it will be together by like November time. I'm hoping that's the. I've just moved into my studio space about 6 months ago, so it's great to kind of have the dedicated space for it. So it's kind of like, yeah, taking small steps at a time.
That's such a wonderful thing to be able to offer.
Yeah, I feel that, like, I don't know, governments don't really help too much with the kind of issue that British manufacturing is disappearing. And I felt like if I don't do something about it, no one will. And that's kind of how I feel about it. For small businesses, you either have to work with a factory in the UK with huge minimums, or you're working quite small scale, but it's very slow. So it's very hard. Yeah, it's very hard to scale as a small business with those kind of two options. So I feel that the more kind of experience that comes into the industry, the kind of more flexible it'll become.
Yeah, and then the better it'll be for everyone in the industry as well.
Exactly, yeah.
Well, I know that you're such a champion of British manufacturing, but I know some of the other things you champion are slow fashion and sustainable design. So do you want to talk to us about that a bit?
Yes, yeah. So when I started my brand, it was kind of slow fashion wasn't really talked about, but it was really the kind of pillars of my business. I'd worked in the fashion industry for about 10 years and was just generally shocked by just the kind of things that were kind of generally acceptable. Like you had a colour swatch and someone would expect that colour swatch to be sent to China within 24 hours and for it to be reviewed. And you're just thinking that's just a crazy amount of air miles. And just ordering huge minimums because it was just the standard of what businesses did, and kind of not really thinking about you're ordering kind of like tens of thousands of pieces, not kind of expecting to sell it and it going to an outlet store. So I was just really shocked by the kind of, mass overproduction, just the waste of energy and materials. So it kind of really, I guess it really affected me. And so when I started my business, I just didn't want anything to do with that, and kind of set, so I wanted to work locally so I could have less carbon footprint, and also to be close to my manufacturers. So if there was anything wrong, or if there needs to be changes made, I could be there quite quickly and not have to have kind of like I don't know, like a prototype going backwards and forwards for 3 months across the world. And then also working with responsible wool and responsible fibres. I've always been very aware of like animal welfare and how the land is cared for. So I work with really amazing mills that really kind of respect and care for the welfare of the animals and the land they graze on. So all the yarn I work with is certified, really kind of fantastic mills that even when you go and visit them in the factory, they're all run by solar panels. They kind of collect all the dust of the cotton and turn that into paper for their office. And it's just, they do really incredible things. All the water is all recycled and used again for agriculture. So kind of everyone really cares about each part of their process.
That's amazing. And actually, I didn't know that some of those things were even possible. So turning the dust into paper, that's blown my mind a little bit. No idea you could do that.
Yeah, no, it was amazing. It was a cotton mill. So I guess it does kind of go, when it's spinning and being twisted, it does kind of go into the air. And I don't think it's like bad enough for you to breathe and for it to affect you, but they do kind of extract it up and it goes into this paper making facility. It's fantastic. And it's those small things, like I find it's really important to go and see where you make your product, where your raw materials come from, because you learn kind of each process and you can see kind of like the good or the bad they're doing. I guess it's both, and you have a better understanding of your product from start to finish.
Yeah, that makes absolute sense. And I can see as well that you because you're the process of creating your products is, there are all these pieces. I think must be even more important that each piece, really well, so that you can tie it all together.
Yes, yeah, definitely. Like, I feel like to be able to confidently say that you create sustainable design, you have to make sure that it's sustainable from the start to finish as well. So I do use all kind of natural fibres, and I do use some sparkly yarns, but they're all SC certified, or recycled. So even the kind of ones that aren't very natural, like they all are certified and kind of and made from these factories that kind of do fantastic things to like the solar panels and the recycling of the fibres.
And I think what's great is that you're so close to everything that you know all of this.
Yeah. I mean, my happy place is being in the factory, whether it's knitting or in the yarn mill. I love it. I love being around the people that make it all.
But I think that's really good, because I think it could be, I think lots of us want to be doing good. But I think what's really nice is you're so close to every part of your business that you know all of these small details, which I think can be not lost. But I think, what I'm saying, that sometimes, you might find a manufacturer, but how deep are you actually looking into them, if you see what I mean? How much do you really know about their business?
Yeah, no, definitely. And also, like, when you go and see them regularly and you have a cup of tea, you kind of learn, how the staff are, how they're looked after. It's those kind of small things that I think are really important.
Absolutely.
And you learn much more from that than you do like an audit form. But I completely understand if you manufacture, far away, it's harder to go and see. But I guess that's what's really amazing about manufacturing in the UK, is that you are so close.
And I think it's amazing you've been able to do that as well, because I know for lots of people that is the dream, to be able to manufacture in the UK. But for, certain products or product types, it's just not possible. So I think it's such an advantage to be able to do that as well and be so close to it all.
Yeah, no, definitely.
And I'd love to sort of pivot slightly, if that's okay, and talk about how you found building your business around a young family, because I think I'm right in saying your children are still really young. And,
yes, yeah.
And you've got your studio, you're running your business, you're doing a lot. How have you managed that?
It's not easy. I've got an 18-month-old and a 4-year-old, and they've just grown up with two family businesses. My husband has a business, and so do I. And it's just, I guess, just what they've grown up with. But Hester, my eldest, was born 3 days into lockdown, so it was kind of unusual, and then carrying on working as well. So he basically had the first year of his life in my stockroom and not doing much else. So he's not too enthused by socks or knitwear, but Hugo, obviously because he was born outside of lockdown, he's had a great experience. He's been to the factories, he's been on photo shoots, and he's really kind of seen the fun side of it. But yeah, it is really hard. I didn't have maternity leave for either, so I was kind of back at work after a couple of days. But I guess with it being your own business, you can do it at your own time. I don't have anyone to kind of telling me what to do, or if my deadlines need pushing, that they need pushing. And luckily, my knitters were all really, really supportive and kind of really helped me kind of keep things ticking along in the background. And I've got an amazing assistant that helped as well, kind of keep things ticking. So I definitely had, I couldn't have done it without all of them, but it is challenging at times, that's for sure.
Yeah, it sounds, and yeah, I didn't realize you didn't get any maternity leave. So that's quite a big ask to have a baby, particularly when you had your first, and then to just keep going, because it's such a huge life change.
Yeah, definitely. But I think also because it was COVID, it was probably quite nice to have the distraction of both. Mm-hmm. I think that was probably quite needed. So yeah, that it was. But I do have a really fond memory of Heston being, I think he was 4 days old, and we kind of had this kind of conveyor belt of packing, my husband and I, and Heston was kind of laying there asleep, and it is a really fond memory of kind of moments like that. They come most weekends they're here at the studio, but they kind of start to make a bit more of a mess, and there's cars everywhere. But but it's good. It's a good balance.
No, it is. And as you say, the great thing about, I think, creating and selling products particularly is that you don't really have to be anywhere at any particular time, and there aren't really any deadlines. It doesn't really matter if you're packing orders to go out at 9 o'clock in the morning or 10 o'clock at night. I think there is a lot of flexibility.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I do kind of share the behind the scenes of my life. So I think a lot of my customers are aware that I have kids, so they're generally quite relaxed with things like that. And also because I do show the kind of behind the scenes, they see everything from the making and then the kind of studio life as well. So yeah, so it works well.
And I think it's nice as well for children to see what you're doing, because I started my first business when my youngest was about 6 weeks old, because they still, as you'll know, they still sleep quite a lot,
Yeah.
And so it like you're doing things in nap times. And I think I actually really like the fact that both my children see me work and know what I do and have an understanding of what I do. And yeah, I just quite like that I'm not disappearing somewhere every day and then coming back, and it feels like just part of our lives, and I do really like that.
Yeah, definitely. I think seeing that process, isn't it? Like I don't know, they see a cone of yarn and then they see it into something, and then they see it being packed, and then I might show them a picture of a customer wearing it, and it's that understanding of, like, I find it really important, the understanding that something is made, it's not just bought in a shop. And I'm trying to kind of teach that with food as well. We're trying to grow vegetables. I'm not very good at gardening, but I'm trying. But I guess it's that kind of understanding that there's a process, isn't there? And there's people involved within it.
Yeah, and I think you're right, that is really important. So thank you for all you've shared so far, Genevieve. I have one final question, which I ask everybody, which is, what would your number one piece of advice be for other product creators?
So my number one piece of advice is to kind of, I find it really important to have friends that are founders, other business makers. And one thing that me and a few friends are doing is sharing our highs. And so we have a kind of WhatsApp thread, and it could be something so mundane to like family and friends, but to you as a business owner, it means a lot. So it could be something that you've worked out a logistical solution, or you've won an account, or you've sold something that wasn't working before. And I just find it so amazing to have this thread with my kind of other founder friends. And when you're having quite a low moment, it's just amazing to look back at it and think, oh, wow, what I've achieved, the small and the big things. So I've just found that really important and gained a lot from it.
That's really nice. And I think it's also really nice because you're all celebrating each other's success as well. And while it might be sometimes like a small win, sometimes those are the ones that are even more important, because I think hopefully lots of us are good at celebrating the big things that happen. But sometimes the small things, they just happen, and maybe you tell someone, but you know what I mean? It could be really easy just to overlook those things. So how nice that you've got a record of it as well, that you could go back and say, oh, look at all these things I did last year or last month or whatever. I think that's really good.
Yeah, definitely. And like, as a small business owner, like sometimes your friends don't get it, like, or your family don't get it, but to have people that understand, the smallest of wins I think is brilliant.
I think that's amazing. Thank you. And thank you so much for everything you've shared.
No, thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much for listening right to the end of this episode. Do remember that you can get the full back catalogue and lots of free resources on my website, vickyweinberg.com. Please do remember to rate and review this episode if you've enjoyed it, and also share it with a friend who you think might find it useful. Thank you again, and see you next week. Hi, this is just a little note to say if you've enjoyed this episode, or indeed any of the episodes, and you would like to, buy me a coffee or something, you can actually now leave tips. So there's a link to how to do this in the show note. Of course, do not feel obliged to do this. This is a free podcast. This will always be a free podcast. But as I say, if you want to buy me a coffee, you can do that via the link in the show notes.